The mahogany table felt cold under my palms. We were supposed to be celebrating record profits, but the silence was suffocating. My father's fingers trembled as he slid a white sheet across the wood. Aunt Valerie's smirk was sharp. Hungry. She whispered that it was over. They were stripping my title and my home, just 12 hours before my $4 million equity pool was scheduled to vest. I swallowed the fire in my throat and stood up. I dropped my house keys onto the table with a dull thud. I looked Valerie dead in the eye and told her good luck running this mess. Then I walked out. The freezing winter air bit into my cheeks the second the heavy oak door clicked shut. I stood on the frost-covered driveway, staring back at the glowing windows of the mansion. I am Elmira. At 34 years old, I had just become a ghost in my own home. For 5 relentless years, I served as the invisible backbone of that company. I remembered the holidays I spent locked in my office, negotiating with furious suppliers while my family clinked champagne glasses upstairs. The office always smelled like stale coffee, and the ozone of the copier at 4 in the morning. I was the one who drafted the vendor contracts and fought the legal battles that Valerie could not even understand. When her reckless vanity projects almost tanked our credit lines 2 years ago, I was the one awake at 3 in the morning. I stared at glowing spreadsheets until my vision blurred, restructuring debt and quietly fixing her catastrophic mistakes to keep the bank from calling our loans. Every time she blew the budget on a trip to Paris, I shuffled the accounts to hide her incompetence from the board. I was the shield. I was the engine. I was the person who stayed so they could play. They happily let me bleed for them in the dark. They called me their savior when the ship was sinking. But the second the water was calm and a $4 million payout was on the table, I became a disposable problem. Valerie's betrayal made perfect sense. She operates like a parasite. What actually hollowed out my chest was the image of the 2 people sitting next to her. My father studied the silk napkin on his lap like it held the secrets of the universe. He refused to look up. My mother turned her head away, shrinking into her chair to avoid my gaze. Right before I stood up from that table, she had leaned over, her voice trembling, and whispered that I should just listen to my aunt to keep the peace. Keep the peace. I gripped the freezing metal of my car door handle. The moment she uttered those words, a massive, suffocating weight vanished from my shoulders. The truth hit me. I was an orphan with living parents. They chose the side of cowardice. Their silence cut my final string of mercy. They broke my back building their empire. But tonight, I am the one holding the hammer. The leather of the driver's seat was ice cold against my back. I reached for my phone. The screen's white glare was the only thing cutting through the dark. My thumb moved without a hint of doubt. I pulled up my messages and tapped Elizabeth's name. She is the lead counsel for the family trust, and more importantly, the only person in that building who actually respects a signature. I typed 4 words. Activate Clause 11C. I pressed send. Valerie thinks she is playing chess. She thinks this was a masterstroke to save the company's bottom line. But she is hiding a secret. She is drowning. 6 months ago, she started gambling with the company's cash reserves, dumping millions into a string of personal investments that went up in smoke. The quarterly audit is weeks away, and the treasury is a hollow shell. She desperately needs my unvested equity pool to be cancelled and returned to the books to hide the massive hole she dug. This was not about a culture fit. This was a frantic attempt to avoid a prison cell. She thinks treating me like garbage will make me crawl into a corner and stay there. She is betting on my heart to override my head. Valerie believes fake tears and the word family can force me into submission. She is counting on my guilt to be her shield. But she made one fatal mistake. She assumed I was as sentimental as she is fake. Emotions can be manipulated. Contract clauses cannot. I spent years bulletproofing that trust while she was busy practicing her CEO face in the mirror. Blood does not protect you in a boardroom. It just makes the betrayal hurt more. Cold, hard preparation is the only thing that actually keeps you safe. 3 days passed in a blur of fluorescent lights and bitter coffee. I stayed in a rented studio that smelled like industrial lemon and old carpet. I watched the notifications on my phone like a hawk. Valerie took my silence as a victory lap. She always was the type to mistake a tactical retreat for a total surrender. Tuesday night, my screen lit up. Valerie was going live. I tapped the notification. There she was, sitting in my parents' living room. She had spent an hour in front of a mirror perfecting her grieving aunt look. Her mascara was just smudged enough to suggest she had been crying, but not enough to actually ruin her face. She looked directly into the camera lens and started spinning a web of lies so thick it was almost impressive. She told our entire community, the business partners I had spent years courting, the neighbors who watched me grow up, that I was a common thief. She claimed she had caught me siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars from the family business to fund a secret, reckless lifestyle. She actually wiped away a fake tear as she described the heartbreak of having to protect my aging parents from their own predatory daughter. I scrolled through the live comments. The vitriol was a tidal wave. People I had known for a decade were calling me a monster, a snake, a parasite. And then, I saw the two names that truly ended any remaining part of my old self. My father and mother had both commented, publicly confirming Valerie's bravery and thanking her for exposing the truth. The air in the room felt thin. My head remained clear. Valerie was so addicted to the spotlight, so obsessed with playing the victim, that she had completely ignored the logic of the empire she was trying to steal. She thought she was winning the court of public opinion. She did not realize she was clicking submit payment on her own bankruptcy. The original family trust had a very specific, very aggressive non-disparagement clause. It was not just a slap on the wrist. It was a financial kill switch. Because she was speaking as a representative of the family firm. Every single lie she told, every view she gathered, and every share her followers triggered was a documented breach of contract with a preset liquidated damage penalty. She was currently broadcasting to over 900 people. She was racking up a bill she could not pay. Every word was another zero on the check she was about to write me. I picked up my laptop and started a screen recording. Keep talking, Valerie. Every syllable is a nail in your coffin. The boardroom did not smell like success anymore. It smelled like floor wax and the cold, metallic scent of a trap snapping shut. Aunt Valerie was already at the head of the table, her hand hovering over the CEO's leather chair like she was about to be crowned. My parents sat to her right, looking small, their eyes darting around the room as if they were waiting for someone to give them permission to breathe. I leaned against the back wall, my arms crossed. My pulse stayed steady. The heavy double doors swung open, and Elizabeth stepped in. She did not have a briefcase. She had a thin manila folder and an expression that turned the air to ice. She walked straight to the head of the table and slid a single document in front of Valerie. She told Valerie not to get too comfortable in that chair. Valerie let out a sharp, jagged laugh. She told Elizabeth that she was late and that I had been terminated. Elizabeth tapped the document and explained that she had spent the last 48 hours reviewing the family trust's provisions, specifically Clause 11C, by terminating me without documented cause. Valerie had not canceled my bonus. She had triggered the self-defense acceleration penalty. Valerie's smirk did not just fade. It curdled. Elizabeth explained that while the standard equity was $4 million, the termination occurring within 24 hours of the vesting window triggered a penalty multiplier of 2.0. The company now owed me $8 million, payable in full, within 30 days. The silence was so thick I could hear my father's shallow, panicked breathing. Valerie's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. She stammered that the reserves were tied up. Elizabeth pulled an iPad from her folder. She explained that 1 hour after I left the house, someone used the family iPad to access my parents' retirement accounts. They used the power of attorney my parents signed last Christmas to transfer every cent of their savings $642,000 into a shell company controlled by Valerie's brother-in-law. My mother let out a sound like a wounded animal. My father's hands started to shake so violently he had to grip the edge of the table. They stared at the screen, at the digital trail. Valerie was too arrogant to hide. She had deleted the records from the browser. But the recently deleted folder on the cloud does not lie. Elizabeth dropped a final set of papers on the table. Because Valerie used a public live stream to disparage a trust officer, the trust had revoked her legal indemnity. Her personal bank accounts were frozen by an emergency court order as of 10 minutes ago. She was personally liable for the $8 million. And since she could not pay, Elizabeth had already filed a lien on the building and the family mansion. I was no longer an employee. I was the landlord. Valerie collapsed back into the chair. Her eyes bulged. Beads of sweat broke out across her forehead as she realized she could not even afford a lawyer to fight back. My parents looked at her, then at me. Their faces twisted in absolute horror. They had protected a parasite, and she had rewarded them by picking their bones clean. I looked at the sweat on Valerie's brow and felt the weight of 5 years of silence finally lift. The dust from the boardroom had not even settled when Elizabeth met me at my car. She handed me a fresh deed. She told me she had forwarded the elder fraud evidence to the district attorney and that her retainer was officially fulfilled. She turned and walked away. 2 hours later, the police led Valerie out of the mansion in handcuffs. She looked hollow. My parents stood on the porch, clutching each other, watching their savior get shoved into the back of a squad car. They had no savings left. No company. No home. Every asset they once owned now belonged to me to satisfy the $8 million debt. My phone vibrated that evening. It was my mother. I let it ring for 3 beats before I answered. Her voice was a wreckage of sobs. She begged for forgiveness. She asked when I was coming home so we could fix this as a family. I told her the house was mine. I told her they were just tenants now and that I would have the lease agreement sent over by morning. I told them to make sure they paid their rent on time, because if they were a day late, I would have the eviction papers ready. I hung up before she could respond. The toxic roots were finally severed. The gavel fell 3 months later. The judge sentenced Valerie to 6 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after serving 4. The court also ordered a full restitution of $642,000 to be paid back to my parents' retirement accounts. But the money was already gone. The social fallout was even more surgical. In our circle, Valerie became a ghost. People crossed the street to avoid my parents when they saw them at the grocery store. The family name was now a brand of shame. 4 months into her sentence, an envelope arrived from the Department of Corrections. I sat on my porch, the morning sun warming my face, and stared at Valerie's cramped, frantic handwriting. I could imagine exactly what was inside. She would be calling me family again, begging me to use my influence to help with her appeal. I did not open it. I felt absolutely nothing. I walked into the kitchen, dropped the sealed envelope into the shredder, and watched it turn into harmless white confetti. That silence was my victory. Tonight, I am hosting a small dinner for the people who actually stood by me. Elizabeth is coming, along with 2 of my former department heads. We are not talking about profits. We are talking about travel and books, and the sheer relief of being around people who do not have a hidden agenda. My shoulders do not feel heavy anymore. The constant anxiety that lived under my skin for 5 years has finally gone quiet. I realized that for a long time, I was addicted to the chaos because I thought it was the price of belonging. I was wrong. Peace is the only thing worth owning. I want you to look at your own life for a second. Have you ever been backed into a corner by the people who share your last name? Have you spent years setting yourself on fire just to keep them warm? There are 3 rules I had to learn the hard way. Rule number 1. Blood is just biology. It is a sequence of DNA, not a contract for unlimited abuse. Mutual respect is the only thing that dictates a real family. Never let the word loyalty be used as a tool to exploit your hard work. Rule number 2. The silence of an enabler is far more destructive than the loud attacks of an enemy. My Aunt Valerie was the monster, but my parents were the ones who held the door open for her. They chose the side of cowardice, because it was easier than standing up for the truth. Evil only wins when the people who are supposed to love you decide that keeping the peace is more important than keeping your soul intact. Rule number 3. The most brutal, devastating revenge is not a shouting match. It is quiet. It is legal. It is the methodical and permanent removal of your presence from their lives. You do not need to win an argument with a narcissist. You just need to strip away their power and walk away while they realize they have finally run out of people to burn. Did you choose to play the good, broken victim today? Or did you finally pick up the pen and start rewriting the rules of your own story? Tell me your experience in the comments. Sometimes, speaking the ugly truth out loud is the very first step toward taking your life back. I am Elmira. And for the first time in my life, I am finally free. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. Why did she wait so long? Why did she let them bleed her dry for 5 years before finally hitting back? It is frustrating to watch someone brilliant act like a doormat for people who clearly do not deserve her. But before you judge Elmira too harshly, we need to talk about why this happens in the real world and, more importantly, how you can make sure it never happens to you. In psychology, what Elmira experienced is called the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. Toxic families are masters at this. They do not treat you like garbage 100% of the time. If they did, you would leave instantly. Instead, they give you just enough crumbs of hope, a rare thank you, a fake "we could not do this without you," or a sudden burst of affection to keep you pulling the lever. You keep thinking that if you just work a little harder or sacrifice a little more, you will finally hit the jackpot of their permanent approval. You were not being stupid. You were being conditioned. Elmira had to lose everything before she realized the machine was rigged from the start. Now, let's look at the street-smart moves that actually saved her, because this is where the story turns from a drama into a blueprint for survival. First, let's talk about what I call the audit strategy. Scammers and narcissists like Aunt Valerie thrive in the fog. They hate details, they hate paper trails, and they hate people who read the fine print. While Valerie was busy playing CEO and chasing likes on social media, Elmira was building her case in the shadows. She did not just hope things would get better. She quietly embedded Clause 11C into her contract. In the real world, this is called active documentation. You do not wait for the betrayal to happen before you start gathering your receipts. You start on day 1. Second, consider the final buyout. Many of you might think Elmira was being cold by turning her parents into tenants. But from a financial self-defense perspective, that was her investment in freedom. She stopped trying to buy their love with her labor and started using her legal leverage to secure her peace. She did not just win a lawsuit. She reclaimed the land they were standing on. Finally, look at the digital literacy move. Valerie thought she was being clever by deleting her browser history, but she was tech illiterate. Almira's use of the recently deleted folder and cloud syncing is a massive lesson for all of us. In 2026, your best defense is often the digital breadcrumbs people leave behind. The verdict is simple. Peace has a price tag, and sometimes that price is the comfort of a familiar yet toxic relationship. Almira did not just get revenge. She performed a surgical extraction of the people who were poisoning her life. If you are currently setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, I want you to remember this. You are allowed to be the hero of your own story, even if it makes you the villain in theirs. Have you ever had to use a nuclear option to protect yourself from family? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's learn from each other. And if you want more deep dives into the psychology of survival and financial strategy, hit that subscribe button. Stay smart, stay protected, and remember, blood might be thick, but a well-drafted contract is thicker.